Welcome to the virtual launch for the new book, Islamophobia, What Christians Should Know and Do About Anti-Muslim Discrimination. My name is Nazir Harb Michel, and I'm here with the book's author, Jordan Denari Duffner, who will tell us a bit about the book. The book is now available for purchase from Amazon, Orbis Books, or other sites and local shops. Jordan is going to give us a short reading from the book, then I'll ask her some questions about it. And at the end of the conversation, Jordan's special announcement, so stay tuned. Let me first introduce myself, and then I will introduce Jordan. Jordan and I met at Georgetown University while I was an MA student in Arab Studies. I was working with the campus imam, and Jordan was the only non-Muslim member of the Muslim Student Association. We worked together on MSA-related events, but after I completed my PhD at Georgetown in linguistic anthropology, I took a postdoc position at the Bridge Initiative on Islamophobia studies. Jordan was a researcher there, and we got to partner on multiple reports as well as podcasts, a great YouTube video series, and in-person presentations. I left Georgetown in 2017 to work as a Middle East and North Africa expert at Dataminr, and most recently, I joined Remitly as a senior researcher helping to develop financial tools for immigrant communities from MENA and beyond. I also serve as the off-campus advisor to the Muslim community at Seattle University. Now let me introduce Jordan Denari Duffner. She is a Catholic writer, educator, and scholar of Muslim-Christian relations. Her first book is entitled Finding Jesus Among Muslims, How Loving Islam Makes Me a Better Catholic. Jordan is pursuing a doctorate in theology and religious studies at Georgetown University and has published essays and analyses in a range of outlets. Jordan has been involved in a broad spectrum of interreligious dialogues and work to combat religious discrimination. She is also a former Fulbright scholar in Amman, Jordan, and she lives outside Washington, D.C. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here with me, Nazir. It's such a pleasure to be able to talk to you about the book, which you had such an impact on. I think more than anyone, you were the person that I was in conversation with while I was writing this book, and it would be very different if you hadn't been involved, and you encouraged me a lot and gave me so many pieces of advice along the way. So it's really exciting that we could talk about the book today on launch day. So thanks again for doing this with me.
Oh, it's always an honor. So why don't we get started? Would you give us the privilege of hearing a little bit of the book?
Absolutely. Here is the book for those who have not yet seen the print version. And I'm going to read a brief bit from the introduction from part of the chapter that's entitled Them and Us. I hope readers come away from this book understanding what Islamophobia is and how it works, that it is interpersonal, institutional, and implicit, and that it is generated and propped up by industry and imperialism. But most importantly, I hope readers get a glimpse into the impact that Islamophobia has, how it deeply affects the lives of parents and children, teachers and students, siblings and grandparents who strive to devote themselves to God and neighbor. In my own circle of Muslim friends alone, I know individuals whose mosques have been targeted by anti-Muslim protests and arson, who have experienced harassment on the street or in public places, who have tolerated offensive comments made toward them by colleagues and college professors, and whose relatives have been killed in hate crimes or unjustly imprisoned. And many of them have faced the range of subtle suspicion to outright hostility from people who call themselves Christian. Though it is less obvious and more indirect, Islamophobia also has an impact on us as Christians. Indeed, some Christians have been on the receiving end of bigotry that was intended for Muslims. But even beyond that, Islamophobia is harmful to us. When we fail to address our own prejudice and to do our small part to combat Islamophobia in our communities and in society, we fall short of living up to our Christian calling. The goal of this book is that we may better live up to the melodic refrain that we so often sing in our churches, that they'll know we are Christians by our love. Thanks.
Thank you. That was beautiful. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you chose to write this book and how it came about?
So back in 2017, actually around the time that I was leaving my post at the Bridge Initiative and starting my PhD program at Georgetown, Orbis Books reached out to me and said, would you be interested in writing a book for us about Islamophobia? And I said, yes, absolutely. I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, because I think a book about Islamophobia for Christians is something that we've really needed for a long time. I mean, it's something that I wish I would have had at my disposal like years ago when we were doing work at the Bridge Initiative, and when we were facing a lot of the rising anti-Muslim political rhetoric and hate crimes back in 2015 and 2016. And I think that, a book like this is needed for two reasons. One, because I think Christians just we have a calling from our faith tradition to combat religious discrimination, regardless of whom it's targeting. We have an obligation, I think, to defend our Muslim siblings in faith simply on the grounds of our common humanity, and because our faith tradition teaches us that people should be able to live in dignity and with religious freedom. But I also think that it's important that Christians learn about and do what we can to combat Islamophobia, because too often we also have played a role in the Islamophobia that persists in our society and in our world. And so it's for that reason that I wrote this book, and why I've also really focused on drawing on our Christian faith tradition in a constructive and a positive way, to say, even though things have maybe been pretty bad at times, and our Christian faith has even been used to justify anti-Muslim discrimination, we can actually harness it for good. And so that's what I'm trying to do in the book.
Absolutely. Will readers find in the book? Can you give us an overview of the book maybe, and talk a bit about how you structured it?
Yeah, so the first half of the book or so is a broad overview of Islamophobia, looking at lots of different facets, from political rhetoric to rising hate crimes, to more subtle or institutionalized forms of discrimination that oftentimes don't make it into the news, but that are a really important part of what Islamophobia is. And that portion of the book, the overview section, takes up about half of the book. And then I turn to focus specifically on manifestations of Islamophobia in Christian communities. There's a chapter that looks at contemporary problems with Islamophobia among Christians. And then there's a chapter that looks at some of the historical antecedents to our present situation. So looking at things from the history of Muslim-Christian relations more broadly to help us understand how we got here. And then the final portion of the book is that more hopeful, positive, constructive part of the book, where I say, okay, this is the problem that exists, and these are the resources from our faith tradition that we can draw from. And I also highlight a lot of the positive examples that already exist. I mean, as you know well, there are so many Christian individuals and initiatives that are doing work to combat Islamophobia. And so I highlight a lot of those as positive examples, and also give some other ideas for what we can do.
Fantastic. So yeah, given that, who do you hope is going to read the book, and what settings do you think it'll be most suitable for?
Yeah, so obviously the book is broadly aimed at Christians. I come from a Catholic Christian community, so I imagine that a lot of people who will read the book are coming from the Catholic tradition, but I hope that it will be broadly accessible. It's the kind of book that I've written with a number of different settings in mind. I imagine that it could be useful in the classroom. I've had some people who read drafts of the book say that they think the first half of the book, particularly that like overview section, could be utilized in non-Christian settings as well, because I don't really have a Christian focus in that section. So it could be used in a high school or a college classroom where students are learning about Islamophobia. But I also hope that it's the kind of thing that like church book groups will read, and people obviously could read on their own time as well. So I hope it will be broadly accessible. I draw on a lot of academic literature, but try to make sure that it's accessible to and also relevant to a lay audience outside of academia.
And yeah, for those audiences that you spoke of, are there particular chapters that you think are of special importance, or anything that you would point out as maybe a favorite, a go-to in the book?
Yeah. So I think the chapter on contemporary manifestations of Islamophobia in Christian communities is one of the most important chapters. It's honestly the one that made me the most angry writing, because it's really sad, and to see and to be I mean, I've been researching this stuff for years, but to have it all sort of in one place, all these examples of where we've fallen short and what's gone wrong. But I think that chapter is really important because it shines a light on some problems that don't often get talked about or aren't even recognized in Christian communities. And then one of the chapters that I'm really excited about is the second to last chapter, where I focus on different aspects of the Christian tradition that I think can be utilized to combat Islamophobia. And one of the things I do in that chapter is I apply Catholic social teaching to the issue of Islamophobia. So this is a set of principles that many Catholics will know about, that is often used to inform how we respond to lots of different social and ecological issues, but it's never been applied, at least to my knowledge, in a concerted way to deal with Islamophobia. So I think that's one of the things in the book that's a little bit new, and that hopefully will inspire some new ideas on the part of Christian communities.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it will. What do you think your readers will be surprised by in the book?
So it's been interesting with the people that I've spoken to so far who have had a chance to read the book. But like, a lot of them have said that they were surprised by the extent of the Islamophobia that's documented in the book. And the people that I spoke to are people that have been well aware that this is a problem, who have maybe even written on it in a professional capacity. But they still were surprised sort of by the extent of the problem and all of the different ways that it impacts Muslims. And so, I mean, that's one thing that might surprise readers. I think the other thing too is that I think a lot of Christians will pick up this book thinking that it's going to be like an Islam 101 book, like, you're afraid of Muslims. Here's all the reasons why you shouldn't be afraid of Muslims. Here's what Islam is about. Here is, what the Quran is, all of that. And there are places in the book where I do some debunking of stereotypes and, give a bit of an introduction to aspects of the Islamic tradition, but that's not the approach that this book takes. And, there are a number of reasons for that, but I think that we have to tackle the bigotry and the racism head on, and not simply be responding to all of these claims that constantly are made about Muslims, and to actually talk about the function that stereotypes play, why they exist, who is served by them, and to unpack, and shed a light on the prejudice and the discrimination itself, rather than basically expect Muslims or Muslims through me to respond to all of the negative stereotypes and hesitations that people have about Muslims.
I wonder if before we get to your special announcement, if I could ask you a question about well, here's how I'll put it. One of my favorite things about your writing is your ability to weave in stories of real people who you know. And sometimes the stories can be inspiring, and sometimes they're rather tragic. I wonder if you see that with the new presidential administration, that we're moving into a new era where maybe Islamophobia will be on the decline. Is there any evidence of that? Have you been hearing from some of your contacts that things are getting better or worse or staying the same?
I think there are reasons to be hopeful, that things are improving. I mean, for example, like, we know that hate crime numbers have gone down. I mean, they're not below what they were before the anti-Muslim fervor around the like the Trump campaign a few years ago. So they're still like relatively high. Um, but I my worry is that Islamophobia has simply been forgotten about rather than actually gone away. Um, I think it was really easy for the non-Muslim liberal public to get um, to be concerned about and vocal about Islamophobia in the 2016 election cycle because it was something that allowed, like, it was part and parcel with being anti-Trump, and so it was a really easy thing to latch onto. Um, but I'm afraid that a lot of these issues still persist, and one of the things that I talk about in the book is the fact that a lot of the anti-Muslim stereotypes that exist are held by people both on the political right and the political left. And I think it's really important that people on all sides of the political spectrum are really introspective and grapple with some of these stereotypes. And that's one of the things that I try to do in the book. So I mean, I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that that the non-Muslim public is still concerned about and aware that this is an issue. And I hope that the book coming out now kind of reminds people that even though this isn't in the news, it's still a problem and we still need to be vigilant in tackling it.
Right. Yeah, it certainly does seem like you have to put in more of a concerted effort to be aware of these types of stories now. So I'm thankful there's people like you who are helping to shed light on these accounts and experiences. So I think everyone's eager to hear about your announcement. So
Sure.
you have this special announcement, and yeah, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what's coming up?
Yeah, so there's a number of virtual events and potentially some in-person book signings that are going to be happening this summer outdoors, which will be really fantastic. But one event that I wanted to share about is that I'm going to be hosting a series of virtual panels over the summer where I bring Muslim individuals from lots of different sectors to talk about their experiences of Islamophobia and also their expertise on this issue. So there's going to be probably 4 or 5 panels over the course of the summer where I invite people, hopefully yourself included, to talk about these different facets of Islamophobia, many of which I talk about in the book, and then others that I didn't talk about in the book, either because I didn't have space or because they hadn't these issues hadn't developed yet. Some of these things that I'm going to invite people to talk about are fairly recent. So yeah, I hope people stay tuned for that. Those panels will be on social media and on YouTube. So I hope in particular that these panels are a supplement to the book, a way for people in my Catholic and Christian circles to hear from Muslims directly, and to get some additional perspectives on issues that are related to Islamophobia. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Are there any other virtual or in-person events coming up that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so I've got an event tomorrow with Rachel Pia Jones, who recently wrote a book called Pillars about her friendships with Muslims and how it impacted her Christian faith. For those in the DC metro area, I'm going to have an outdoor book signing in the second weekend of June. So you can find details about that online. And some other events upcoming with the Rumi Forum, with the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at Georgetown, and with the local library system in Prince George's County, Maryland, where I live. So yeah, I hope you can join us virtually for some of those.
Looking forward to it. Absolutely. Well, thanks again very much, Jordan.
Thank you, Nazir. It was great to talk to you, and I hope I get to see you in person soon.
Absolutely. Take care.